When it comes to having quite long cells with content in, usually text content, then there are a number of things we can do to deal with that text content. Taking our employees file, there is a sheet in here called TBL Employees V2, where the full address is actually in one cell. If we want that whole address to be visible, we could just make sure that we auto widen the column to be as wide enough to show everybody. That's not always feasible. We might not want all that space to be used horizontally. So we could drag in the width of the column, and as long as there's nothing in the next column, if I delete this telephone number, for example, then the address will run across the front of the next column. So we can see that it looks like it's across there. If I put the telephone number back, then the address does not run over. So we need other ways of dealing with what effectively are wide columns full of text and still be able to read them. Well, there are a number of options. The first obviously was to auto fit the column, but sometimes that makes it go wider than the screen and it's not really user friendly. Second option is to wrap the text, and we do that by selecting the cells in question. So let's select the whole column. That then causes any text that is not visible to wrap within the cell. And we can see that the wrapping is in slightly different places dependent on the length of the text. The wrapping will always take place at a space. It will never split words. That's a potential option, but that will increase the height of the column. If we turn wrap text back off, then we go back into everything disappearing. Another option is to actually shrink the text to fit. Now, if you want to shrink everything so that it fits at this width and the height without increasing the height of the rows, then we again select the relevant cells. So I've selected the whole column. Go on to the home ribbon, and we need to go into the extra settings here. So it's either that button, or that button. They will all take you to the same dialog box, which is the Format Cells dialog box. On the Alignment tab, here we have an option to shrink to fit. Okay, now you'll see that that does work, but it does mean any long addresses are shrunk very small. That one there, for example, shrunk so small that it's very hard to read and potentially very borderline on whether when you print that it would be legible. However, it has done what we've asked it to do, which is to shrink the text within the available width and the available height. So it doesn't wrap and doesn't increase the height of the rows, and it doesn't widen the columns so that you then have a very wide column. Now you'll find the shrink to fit in place. If I do widen the column slightly, then everything can increase a little bit to still be visible. That one's now visible. You could get a balance between shrinking to fit and widening the column so that it suits you. It's just another option for dealing with cells with extra text. We go back in, we can turn shrink to fit off. So we have the options of wrap text, shrink to fit. If you do choose wrap text, which is a pretty popular option, the wrapping takes place at the point Excel thinks is most appropriate. And really it just sees, well, I can't fit the 7YT in, so let's put that on a new line. In this particular case, I can't fit the Yorkshire in, so let's put that on a new line. What's happening in some cases, it's splitting the postal code. In other cases, it's splitting the county. And in this particular case here, it's splitting the town, Newcastle-upon Tyne. We can actually manually override where the wrapping takes place. If we leave wrap text on, and then we enter each cell, that's the only drawback. It would have to be done at each cell. We can actually effectively insert a line break within our cell by placing the cursor where you want in the cell. So I'm going to place it there before the county name. We cannot press enter because that just enters the data and knocks us down to the next cell anyway. What we're after is inserting a little line break there, and that's achieved by holding down the Alt key on the left of your keyboard and then pressing enter. That then inserts a manual line break at that point and potentially makes the cell easier to read. This one, Alt return. On this one, keep the full county name together, Alt and return, and the same here. It's a great little tool, but it has that drawback that it's a manual process. You go into the cell, you place your cursor at the point where you want the line break, and then Alt and enter. There's nothing to stop you having multiple line breaks within a cell. I may wish to put another one there, Alt, enter, and I end up with 2 line breaks. And when I press return, the content drops and the height goes even higher because I've now got 3 rows of text. So it's just another way of dealing with large quantities of text in a single cell in Excel. You have wrap text to allow Excel to do it. We have auto fit the width of the column, so it goes as wide as it needs to for the widest entry, which sometimes can be wider than the screen. Shrink to fit, so that everything fits and is visible in the cell at the width and the height you set. Sometimes the text size does drop very small though. Or we have our manual breaks that we can put into a cell using Alt and Enter to place a manual line break in a cell at the point where you have the cursor. Place my cursor there, Alt, return, and I get a manual line break.